Hi everyone, it's me, Arielle, and it's Wednesday Warriors, and today I'm going to be talking about emotional vulnerability. I also wanted to tell you guys that I am in the process of getting a new webcam. It is on its way being shipped to me, so I should have it in a few days. Hopefully by the time I have to make my next video, I will have it so that you don't have to hear the awful lisp noise anymore that I make when I make videos. When I say my S's, especially at the ends of sentences, as you can probably hear in what I just said, my video camera makes me sound like I have a lisp. It makes me sound like a snake, and it's bothered me for a year since I've had this camera, and it drives me nuts, and it just, I feel, takes away from what I'm saying sometimes because the background noise is so bad when I say certain words, and you probably all think that I sound like that. So it will be nice for you to hear my real voice. But I just wanted to tell you that bit of good news. I'm very excited to get a new webcam. It's supposed to be a top of the line sort of a thing. I got it on sale. I'm really excited for that. So hopefully it's going to make my videos better in the future. And the exact question is, what contributes to my emotional vulnerability? The short answer is a lot of things. I'm going to try to pinpoint some of those things for you so that you can have a better handle on what makes you vulnerable, and just so you can be aware of it. I mean, sometimes being vulnerable is okay, or it's a part of life, but if you can recognize when you're feeling vulnerable, you can get through that vulnerability without being too uncomfortable. Or when you are recognizing that you're feeling vulnerable, you'll know what to do to make yourself feel more stable and more sure. I think we all know this already, but other people can definitely contribute to emotional vulnerability, especially if we are people-pleasing, or if we put a lot of weight on what other people think or feel or say or do. If we are young, then we tend to be more emotionally vulnerable in respect to our parents. If we are older, we can even be emotionally vulnerable in respect to our children and to our spouse. So I think a lot of the time it's interesting because on one hand you can be vulnerable when you are in a situation with a stranger or many strangers, because as I said, just worrying about what other people think can make you feel vulnerable, worrying about what they are feeling, just trying to please people. That's one thing. And then on the other hand, for close relationships, people that we are really close to, depending on the situation, can make us feel very emotionally vulnerable, like a spouse, a child, a parent. Emotional vulnerability is almost, I would consider, a human trait. I mean, we are all going to be vulnerable at some point in our lives. Or at some point in our day, usually. It doesn't mean we are weak people. Vulnerable doesn't mean weak. I think that is a common misconception. Being vulnerable means you are capable or susceptible to being wounded or hurt. It also means you're open to moral attack, criticism, temptation, and you can see in those definitions the word weak does not exist. So don't think that if you are ever vulnerable, you are therefore weak. It's not true. They're not the same. Many people will say that emotional vulnerability is the key to closeness in very serious relationships. You know, when you're dating someone, when you become married, a lot of people will say that you have to be open. You have to give your raw, real self in order to become close and in order to experience the fullness of love that you're looking for. I think there's a lot to be said for that. But if emotional vulnerability is an ongoing thing, an ongoing trait, for example, that you have, it can basically stem from a deficit of self-confidence. So you want to just be aware of emotional vulnerability and all that it entails. Emotional vulnerability is partially how you react to the environment. And if you are often emotionally vulnerable, you might withdraw, hide away, escape from real life, which is not the answer. I read some things about acceptance strategies, meaning when you are, if you are a patient working with a therapist or something like that, and you are typically emotionally vulnerable, or you have high emotional reactions to certain things that have happened to you, certain experiences you've had, or certain thoughts, certain behaviors, disorder, anything like that. There are things that are tried, and one of them is validation. And I had read, a common problem for therapists working with clients who experience intense emotional distress and life-threatening behavior is the tendency to disregard the importance of validation strategies. Therapists, fueled by anxiety brought on by working with people who are desperate, often overemphasize the role of change strategies. The problem with overemphasizing change with clients suffering from certain things is that it tends to recapitulate aspects of the early invalidating environment. Validation strategies are used to help clients understand that their responses make sense. The therapist communicates validation by listening, reflecting, and highlighting the validity of the client's phenomenal experience. I don't want to get too wordy, too deep, too intellectual here with this video, because I don't think it's necessary. It's not needed. We can have a very concrete discussion about emotional vulnerability without all of the jargon that you can read in certain self-help books, things like that. Not that those self-help books aren't warranted and aren't good, just, we can have more of a conversation about this, cut and dry statements, helpful tips, things like that in a video where you don't need to have an entire background from a self-help book in order to do this. Plus, the great thing about this rotation that we're doing right now is that each week is a different main topic, and then there are little chunks for Monday through Sunday where we're all talking about and answering different questions. So if you're watching these rotations that we're doing as a whole, you're really getting the bigger picture. If you are watching just certain videos here and there, obviously they're still going to be helpful. They still have a lot of merit on their own. But obviously I'm here. My question is, what contributes to emotional vulnerability? I mean, that's just some random big question that's out there. It relates to what we have talked about thus far on Monday and Tuesday. So you want to keep that in mind. I think that in talking about emotional vulnerability, it is very important to be self-aware. And we actually talked about being mindful and self-aware 2 weeks ago in the rotation. I talked about it on Wednesday, and I'm going to give you the link to that video, simply because I think if you watch that video and then you use that to pertain to this video, it's very helpful, because different things contribute to each person's emotional vulnerability. What makes me feel emotionally vulnerable may not make you feel emotionally vulnerable. And obviously I did touch on some things that are just general and basic for everyone, and talking about emotional vulnerability in general. But you really need to be self-aware when it comes to this topic, because everyone's different, and everyone feels different emotions in different situations with different people, different scenarios, and being mindful and self-aware is pretty much the first step. Once you have that covered, then you can go from there. Then you can really discuss this topic. Have a great week, everyone. Bye.